But Your Excellency, this footprint has been put here for a reason, because when you compare it with our neighbors, our footprint, given our ambition, is still inadequate. Now, our friends in South Africa have 103 missions abroad. With the kind of mandate you have given us, Your Excellency, including on diaspora affairs, including on candidature, it increasingly becomes evident to us that we do not have sufficient coverage. And so part of the conversation we need to have is whether the coverage that we have is sufficient. The journey we started in July, Your Excellency, has led us along a path of consultation. We have consulted widely, reached experts in maritime affairs, in health, in peace and security in academia, in the media, in civil society, including in the judiciary. And so, Your Excellency, it is our view that we have undertaken consultative processes that are compliant with the Constitution of the Republic. If you notice, Your Excellency, it's only one major consultation that is still outstanding to our mind, which is the consultation with yourself, namely this particular forum. Next slide, please. So we've come up with a 6-chapter document, a document that speaks in chapter 1 on our prioritized national interests and values. And the point here, Your Excellency, is that the reason for foreign policy is the promotion of the national interest, the fostering of our national interest. And part of the conversation we need to have is what is the national interest? An examination of our Constitution suggests certain elements that fit into the matrix of the national interest. In particular, Article 138 of the Constitution speaks to the question of territorial integrity and stability, the protection of the commonwealth, of the citizenry and the citizenry's well-being. It speaks to the entitlements of the citizens, namely their rights and their freedoms, amongst others. And these are some of the interests that are prioritized that we need to protect using our foreign policy. Your Excellency, the 2nd chapter examines the operating environment and basically asks, why are we reviewing the 2014 policy? And in examining the operating environment, it's obvious, Your Excellency, that many changes have taken place in the operating environment. On the economic sphere, we are dealing with complex challenges around fiscal challenges and debt. We are dealing with challenges around climate. We are dealing with opportunities around the demographic shift and many others. But increasingly also we are dealing with not just a resurgence, but a strengthening of agency on the part of various organs of the state and also citizens. Parliament is playing a role in foreign policy, the judiciary, county governments, academia, private sector, civil society, the media is asking questions, young people are asking questions, and that's why we're having this conversation. Additionally, when you look at things from an international lens, it is evident, Your Excellency, that the fabric of the global order, the fabric of the international order is considerably punctured. The parchment by which global order is sustained is threatened. And the key question revolves around, do we repair this parchment? Do we repair this fabric or reform it? Or do we replace it? And Your Excellency has been at the center of conversations around reform of the international architecture, and we are very anxious, Your Excellency, to hear your thoughts in that respect. Your Excellency, the 3rd chapter then considers the tools of diplomacy, the tools of foreign policy, namely bilateral and multilateral engagements, but also an emerging concept known as plurilateral engagements, which is really about the realization that because the parchment of the international order is ruptured, because multilateralism is not delivering as it ought, interest-based institutions are beginning to cohere. They may not be as structured, but you can begin to see an emergence of new institutional formations, and we will have that discussion.
Like and short but critical consultation with the President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, I can only say that the PS has done a very good job in running us through the outline of the emerging or evolving foreign policy. But why we thought that it's so important is because we want to be able to domesticate foreign policy. In the middle of this year, when the young men and women of Kenya were raising some concerns, they kept on asking this question: why does the President travel? Not looking at the end result, but why does he travel? It even migrated from why to the mode of travel. And in the process, critical aspects of what emerges out of proper engagement at the highest level was being lost in that conversation. So it is our desire that through this kind of interaction, under your leadership, Your Excellency, we can perhaps coin something that we might call foreign policy mashinani, so that we can get the ordinary citizen, the young men and women of this country, to understand why it is important for a nation to engage with the globe. Try and imagine yourself living in a country with a dormant foreign policy. A nation that is like an introvert, does not interact with anybody, does not talk to anybody. What kind of nation would that be? So, as we look at what has happened, the reality is that the President of Kenya, in the 2.5 years or so since he took over, have dramatically reprofiled Kenya's image in the international arena. I can speak with confidence because I've made so many trips. And the question in some of these fora is that, and what does Kenya say? What does Kenya think? That is important. For you, some of you who are politicians here, you know how it feels when you are at a public rally and a particular speaker speaks, and then when he walks away and leaves the arena, and you find the audience disappearing with him. It happens. But Kenya is becoming a pivotal state, a reference center, a nation where people want to know and ask and seek guidance from. That does not come easy, neither does it come lightly. So through this kind of conversation, how do we anchor Kenya's foreign policy? Through this conversation, how do we support it? How do we make sure that the budgeting process of our nation properly supports the foreign policy initiative, bearing in mind there are also competing interests in other sectors? These are issues that can only come through if we build sufficient consensus and be able to direct and know that what we are looking for has an impact on our people. So, Your Excellency, I was not setting you up, but I was just saying, they were asking, why do you travel? And that was a very telling statement. It meant that there's a communication gap that we need to fill as a nation, so that the bulk of our citizens can understand why international engagements, why meeting international obligations is important, both for our sovereignty, for our security, and for our economic well-being.
The foreign policy of Kenya. But giving it flesh, giving it budget, and giving it energy has allowed us to do many things to grow our diplomacy. It has allowed us to protect the 4 million Kenyans who live abroad, has allowed us to run evacuation programs when those Kenyans have been in distress, such as in Sudan, Your Excellency, where we're the first country to get our citizens home, such as the ongoing evacuation out of Lebanon, where so far we have received 300 distressed Kenyans from Lebanon, and that process is ongoing. But also it has allowed us to extend protection through ensuring documentation is done for our diaspora everywhere, including running the Mobile Consular Services program that has allowed us to serve Kenyans in 175 different cities in the 2 years that we have been in business. Your Excellency, what does a well-done foreign policy do as far as diaspora remittances are concerned? It allows us to put money, programs, and people to create an incentive framework for remittances. And Your Excellency, I'm happy to announce that we see an upward trend as far as the remittances that come from this country. We last year reported $4.2 billion US, which, as you know, is higher than the remittance, the foreign exchange that comes from tea, coffee, tourism, and I'm not trying to start anything with the PSAs for tourism, for agriculture, and so on. But Your Excellency, that number is critical because it comes from less than 4 million people sending money in small ticket sizes to their homes. Your Excellency, it allows us to think about people who have been on the margins and how to keep them connected to their homeland. Countries that have supported their diasporas have done well. And we have examples everywhere, from Ireland, from Israel, from India, and so on, and we can see the work that has been done by those diasporas. Ensuring that our foreign policy has legs and has had diaspora diplomacy at its heart has ensured then that we've been able to keep our diaspora connected and help them achieve more and more of their rights. Your Excellency, I'm currently hosting a delegation from the diaspora who are here to meet with various members of Bunge to talk about electoral law reform and to see how they can take even more part in the work that we do. So, Your Excellency, this process of redoing the foreign policy of Kenya and doing it in such an open way that allows various stakeholders to speak to it will give us fresh impetus, will allow us to feel, touch this thing that is called diplomacy and this thing that is called the foreign policy. I want to thank you, Your Excellency, and I want to thank my colleague, MATIANG'I and Waziri Wetu, Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, for the leadership on this process, and to say that, Your Excellency, we look forward to hearing the direction from you and to having a foreign policy that we all will be able to support and get behind. Asante sana.